Very good morning, students. Today we will start our lecture 13 on water use efficiency and irrigation efficiency in water management course. What is water use efficiency? As the name indicates, efficiency is output by input. What is the output in crop production? That is the yield. And what is the input? That is the water what you have added. And how that is evaluated? It is evaluated through evapotranspiration, and it is expressed in a unit kg per hectare kg per hectare So water use efficiency refers to the water used by the crop is evaluated in terms of water use efficiency. It is the ratio of the crop yield to the amount of water. It is the crop yield to the amount of water used by the crop in evapotranspiration or total water applied. It is a ratio of yield divided by evapotranspiration. So we have divided the water use efficiency in two types. The one is crop water use efficiency and second is field water use efficiency. What is crop water use efficiency? As the name indicates, crop, the amount of water used by the crop to the amount of yield that has been produced. That is, yield of a crop per unit of water lost through evapotranspiration. Just evapotranspiration losses has been considered. But in case of field water use efficiency, the total quantity of water you have applied to the field, including the losses. So we call it as field water use efficiency. Field water use efficiency is the ratio of yield of the crop to the total amount of water used in the field. In other words, that is water requirement. You can see total water requirement, which include irrigation requirement, effective rainfall, plus soil contribution. So the field water use efficiency include all the other terms where we have losses included. So what are the factors that determines the water use efficiency? There are 6 factors. The first is nature of the crop. The crop determines the water use efficiency of the crop, because if you see, compare the rice has a water use efficiency of just 3.4 or 3.3 kg per hectare whereas ragi has a water use efficiency which is the highest, around 13.4 kg per hectare So the difference between the nature of the crop. The second is soil moisture. Higher the soil moisture properly utilized by the crop, then higher is the water use efficiency, because there will be higher yield and lower evapotranspiration. The next is plant population. Optimum plant population decides the water use efficiency of a crop, because at the optimum plant population you get optimum yield. As a result, there will be higher yield, and as a result of that, higher water use efficiency. The next, the climatic condition. Generally, the harsh climatic condition, flood, drought, will reduce the water use efficiency, whereas optimum conditions, congenial climate conditions for the crop growth will play a very important role in increasing the water use efficiency of a crop. The next is fertilizer. Optimum recommended dose of fertilizer give you a good amount of yield, which resulted in a higher water use efficiency. Then proper agronomic practices, since from sowing to harvest, which plays an important role in increasing the yield of a crop, which in turn increases the water use efficiency. After knowing the water use efficiency, we come across the terms related to the irrigation efficiencies. So we have different irrigation efficiencies such as water application efficiency, water distribution efficiency, water conveyance efficiency, when we are talking about the artificial application of water. So we'll deal individually. So what is irrigation efficiency? It is defined as ratio of water output to the water input. It is the ratio of water output to the water input. That is the ratio of percentage of irrigation water consumed by the crop of a irrigated farm or a project to the water delivered to the source forms the irrigation efficiency. This is the formula, where WC stands for irrigation water delivered from the canal during the growth period, and WR stands for water delivered from the canal during the growth period. In most of the irrigation project efficiency is just 12 to 13%. Remember, very important with respect to exam point of view. The irrigation efficiency of most of the canals or projects is just 12 to 34%. The next, after understanding the irrigation efficiency, as the water efficiency, that's the output by input. It is output by input. So the water conveyance efficiency means when there is a output, when the water has given by a source, so what is determining the increase output? So there are certain losses that determines the output. If there is less loss, higher the output. If there is more loss, lesser the output. So which are those losses? The first is what can be determined by an efficiency, that is water conveyance efficiency. It is the ratio of water delivered in the field at the outlet head to the water that is delivered into the canal system or a reservoir. We call it as water conveyance efficiency. It means if this is a pipe, the pipe has various damages. So this is from the source, water delivered from the source reaching the sink. So much of amount of water is lost in a conveyance. So that is conveyance losses. That can be calculated for the formula EC, that is conveyance efficiency, is equal to WT by WF. What is WT stands for? Water introduced into the conveyance system from point of diversion, and the water WF stands for water delivered from the farm by a conveyance system, that is a field supply channel from the source which forms the water delivered to the field, and the point of diversion from which it has been diverted. So water conveyance efficiency are generally low. About 21% of losses occur in the earth and water resources only. So best method is such that you reduces the water conveyance losses. The next is water application efficiency. Now water has been conveyed. Then it's about application. It is the ratio of irrigation water stored in the root zone. If this is a crop with a root zone, water stored in the root zone to the water delivered to the field, we determine with the water application efficiency. It is the ratio of volume of water that is stored in the root zone of a crop and ultimately consumed by transpiration or evaporation or both to the volume of water actually delivered at the field. It is termed as water application efficiency. That is irrigation water stored in the root zone to the irrigation water delivered from the farm, which forms the water application efficiency. Then third is water storage efficiency. It refers to the how much amount of water stored in the root zone to the water delivered to the field. It forms the water storage efficiency. It is the ratio of water stored in the root depth by irrigation to the water needed in the root zone to bring it to the field capacity. So when we are talking about the water storage efficiency, how much amount of water to be stored in the root zone in order to bring it to the field capacity condition that is congenial for the crop growth, we talk about water storage efficiency, that is water stored in the root zone and water required in the root zone to bring it to the field capacity, that is WS by W. What is WS? Water stored in the root zone during the irrigation, and WWE is water needed in the root zone prior to irrigation, that is the field capacity available moisture content. Prior to irrigation, how much amount of water needed in the root zone and how much actually stored in the root zone gives you the water storage efficiency. Means like if you take an example of storage tank, how much of water is needed to fill or bring it to the field capacity, how much is actually delivered or stored in that field or the tank, we consider it as a water storage efficiency. The next is the most important, water distribution efficiency. How properly water is distributed in your entire field will determine the efficiency of irrigation. So water distribution efficiency gives you that result. It is expression for distribution efficiency, the extent which water is uniformly, this term is important, uniformly distributed is determined by the water distribution efficiency calculated by the formula ED is equal to 1 minus average deviation divided by average depth applied. 1 minus average deviation, that is D, divided by average depth applied multiplied by 100 give you the water distribution efficiency. Water distribution efficiency is 1 minus D. that is average numerical deviation in the depth of water from a average stored during the irrigation. So a water distribution efficiency of 80% means what? 10% of water was applied in excess and consequently 10 plus of water is deficient in comparison to the average depth of application. In case of average equal distribution, 80% means 20% remaining. So 10% water has not been properly distributed all over your field. It gives you the water distribution efficiency. ED is equal to 1 minus D divided by deviation multiplied by 100. That is average deviation from the depth. If you take a 1 centimeter depth at one point, 3 centimeter depth water has been distributed, 5 centimeter depth water has been distributed. So you take an average of that. Then you take, if that average is around 5 centimeter, then you take average of deviation 1 minus 5 minus 3 minus 5, 5 minus 5. So average of each deviation divided by average depth. What is the average depth? 5 centimeter gives you the water distribution efficiency. The next, concept to use efficiency. One important terminology with respect to exam point of. What is concept to use of water? There are two terms, concept to use and conject to use. What is concept to use? Amount of water that has been used by the plant to meet its evapotranspiration plus metabolic need is called as concept to use of water. Whereas conject to use of water means water that is used from the multiple source in order to increase the water use efficiency or irrigation efficiency. We call it as conjective use of water. Here there is another term called as consumptive use of water. It is the ratio of normal consumptive use of water to the net amount of water depleted from the root zone. It's nothing but amount of water that has been taken up by the plant in meeting the metabolic need and evapotranspiration, and amount of water that is stored in the root zone gives you the water storage, consumptive use efficiency. It is the ratio of consumptive water used by the crop of irrigation farm and the irrigation water stored in the root zone of the soil gives you the consumptive use efficiency. And consumptive use efficiency in explaining the difference in crop response from the different methods of irrigation. Yes, we have one example over here how to calculate this irrigation efficiency. However, we will deal these few examples in another lecture. If you have any doubt, just comment. Thank you.